What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I want to talk about something a little interesting that I've seen all over the internet as it pertains to the current Yu-Gi-Oh format, and not really a Master Duel thing so much, just more of a TCG thing. But this conversation of an emergency list, or what people might call, I believe it was called an adjustment list in the past, whether or not we need that. People have been happy about the ban list that we got back in the beginning of the month. This is all bad. Alright, it's 2022, and it's pretty fair to say that anything anyone does is going to be scrutinized, and people will never be happy and or satisfied, particularly on the internet, and especially in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. For those of you who didn't see the ban list for whatever reason at the beginning of February, it was definitely met with some mixed reviews, with some people, including myself, praising some of the hits they made, banning things like EVA, and really slowing down some of the other decks that have been dominant for a while. But there were definitely some question mark moves and things that had players wondering why these types of things were happening. Particularly things like Skill Drain coming to 3, and things like Tri-Brigade remaining mostly untouched, among others that have caused some discussion among the community. Now, for those of you who have never heard of the concept, a couple of times in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, we have had what's been referred to as an adjustment or emergency ban list. It doesn't happen a lot, and as a matter of fact, I can only remember 2 times off the top of my head where an actual emergency list happened, starting with the first one that happened all the way back in the early 2000s when they banned Cyberstein. Now, Cyberstein was, legal at the time as a Jump promo when it first came out for Shonen Jump Championship Series. For many years, this card was insanely powerful, and it's still pretty good, limited at, to 1 to this day. But this was a card that got banned in the middle of a format as it came out because it was just so powerful that they needed to really take a step forward and hit it so that it didn't disrupt the meta to the point that it had been prior. The next emergency list happened a lot more recent, going back to what I believe was 2016, and that was at the beginning of Pepe format, which I hate to even call a format because it really didn't last all that long. Right around the time Perform Age Plush Fire started to see some play as Dimension of Chaos was released, Pepe was single-handedly the most dominant deck of the format, to the point where players were complaining it was everywhere and no one really wanted to deal with it, forcing Konami to step in because it was too powerful, too fast. Damage Juggler was banned, Plush Fire was banned, and Ptolemaeus was banned, all in an emergency list that was released about 3.5 weeks after the ban list for that season had dropped. Damage Juggler was really good. It's at 3 now, and it's not really used much anymore, but if you can imagine a slower format where being able to use this effect from the graveyard in connection with things like Brilliant Fusion was a lot more prominent. Plush Fire is still banned to this day, as is Ptolemaeus. Both have really powerful effects, and I do think we could maybe experiment with moving them around, but that's not really the topic of today's video. The reason I bring this up anyway is because I've seen a lot online, both on Reddit and among Facebook pages and on other YouTube videos for that matter, certain people in the community talking about the need for an emergency list to our current format, saying that there is a very large majority of decks that are playing things like the Brave Token / Adventure Token engine, the Artifact Scythe package, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't know quite whether or not I agree with that need for an emergency list, but let's at least humor the discussion and talk about it, because using 2017 as an example, these were sort of the moves that we saw hit as the emergency list, quote-unquote. So, again, like I said, Damage Juggler was banned, Plush Fire was banned, and Ptolemaeus was banned, and they also limited 3 cards with Luster Pendulum, the Draco Slayer, Performer Palace Skullcrobat Joker, and Monkey Board all going to 1, and Monkey Board would later be banned in a subsequent format. Why this is all relevant is because this deck was so powerful and so dominant that they hit 6 cards from it almost a month after it even started to exist. Since then, there's been lists that have come out where things have been hit soon. There's a lot of people who believe that Spiral was an emergency list, but it wasn't. If you look at the there's a lot of people who believe that Spiral was an emergency list back in 2018 when Double Helix came out, but if you look at the layout, it was not out of the realm of the usual list cycles. We were getting a list around every 3 to 4 months, and that fell right in line with this. Konami TCG typically doesn't like to ban cards right after they come out or hit cards right after they come out for obvious reasons because there's money to be made on reprints. But where do you weigh the balance of a deck being too powerful that it just drastically warps the game state and making money on a product? Also, the question you have to ask, and the question I'm kind of posing here for you guys, because I'm really interested to hear everyone's feedback on this topic, is, are we at that point in the current game? If you haven't been living under a rock lately, you've surely heard of Artifact Scythe and Artifact Dagda being massively played, represented in a lot of top decks, along with Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, as a very, very easy to play extra deck lockout for the opponent that requires almost no effort to make. Artifact Dagda is a generic monster that's a Link 2, and all you really need to do is be able to activate the effect of another card on the field to get Scythe directly from the deck, and then you can pop it with Destroy Phoenix Enforcer, or various other things. Dagda himself would pop your card, but typically you don't want to do that. You want to pop it so that Scythe triggers during the opponent's standby phase, and you basically lock them out of being able to play. Now, Scythe is... This package in general is really oppressive, and Scythe shuts off a whole mechanic. It's not the first time we've had a conversation about it either. Scythe had been talked about a couple of years back when Sanctum was dominant, when the artifact package in general was seeing a lot of play, but ultimately there were no hits to it, and I kind of agreed with that sentiment at the time, even if I wasn't actively making conversation videos about it. A lot of people talk about Phoenix Enforcer because of how prominent the package is in so many different decks, and the point where you're not really seeing it in Hero, you're just seeing the Hero package with Fusion Destiny splashed into random engines because of how easy it is to make and how powerful the card is. But there is no more powerful application than with Scythe and Dagda, specifically because it's basically any two monsters, get you Scythe out of the deck, and then your Phoenix Enforcer pops it. Your opponent can't really play their turn unless they open to Forbidden Chalice or something to counter Scythe, and that really is kind of oppressive. So I get it. So the first question then really is, do we need to hit any of these cards? Do any of these necessitate an emergency response from Konami because of the one-sided or overly representation of this whole package in decks? And my answer to that is probably not. I definitely think Scythe deserves to be banned, and I do know that our current ban list says no sooner than a couple months, so I don't really know what exactly that means. It's almost like Konami got tired of people talking so much about the ban list, and where's our ban list? You said no sooner than so-and-so, that they just slapped a generic thing out there to say, yeah, a couple months, we'll put it out there. So it may not necessarily be an emergency list type situation, but if this continues to be a really heavily represented thing in a lot of competitive events, whether that's remote duel or regionals or what have you, even as we hopefully get back to, big scale in-person events, in the coming months, Konami might be forced to take that action. I just don't know if it's going to be enough that there's action taken before, we'd be in the realm of getting a next ban list, which is, to say, are they going to do some kind of emergency adjustments? And I don't see it being the case. But this would definitely be some consideration, right? Do you ban Scythe, which would effectively make the artifact package mostly unplayable? Do you ban Dagda, which makes Scythe a lot harder to get out, but you can still trigger it pretty easily? What do you guys think of that? I really want to know in the comments down below what you guys think, because that's a lot of what I've seen on this topic, with people talking about, Scythe is the problem, Dagda is the problem, in conjunction they're a problem, but obviously there's no reason to hit both. Artifacts don't really have any other viable targets outside of Scythe that are going to net you a real advantage. Do they hit Phoenix Enforcer? I highly, highly doubt it. I don't even know that I think it needs to be. And that may lay with Fusion Destiny being a problematic method to get Phoenix Enforcer out of the deck entirely. But that's just sort of one of the things that people are putting on the table for this discussion. The other thing I've seen, and I'm serious about this, I'm not necessarily saying I agree with it, but as everyone talks about the Adventurer token / Brave token engine being played in almost anything, because it's literally a free engine that gives you an Omni Negate for one card, as well as a searchable equip spell that can be recycled, do they need to do something to hit this engine? Is it too good? Is it better than they anticipated? Or is it just that it's, it's really enhancing any deck that can play it, but it's not necessary? I know that Konami typically does not like when one strategy dominates the meta to the point where it's the only thing anyone plays. We've seen mass hits in the past to things like Zodiac for that similar type of approach, but I honestly would be stunned if any hits were made to the Adventurer token engine at any time soon. It is a really strong package that does a lot and really is too splashable, but considering the fact that it's only just come out, it really is the only selling point of Grand Creators. There's value behind it, and it hasn't done anything yet, right? Like, it's seeing a ton of play online in representations, but we don't have a large enough scale of tournament results to really look at this if you were Konami and say, oh god, this is too powerful, this is shifting the meta one way or another. and we need to make an emergency hit. So again, do I think that we could eventually see the adventurer package hurt in some way? It's definitely possible, even if it's just based on representation. Or, you know, I don't know, if you hit Griffin Rider, then the whole package sort of becomes more just an extender type thing. But I would not in any way think we see any hits to this anytime soon, because I don't see that this necessitates some kind of emergency list. Like I said, I think Scythe is ultimately more pressing, but I don't think that it would follow that same trend that those previous ones have. Now, when talking about this whole, you know, emergency list package, dominating strategies thing, obviously the two of the other things people bring up all the time are Halky, Fibrex, and Predaplant, Verite, Anaconda. This happens every time a ban list comes around, but to be honest, Halk is definitely dominating a ton now. It's gone up in price, it's seen more representation, especially with Emergency Teleported 3, making it so much easier to abuse, to play as an engine with things like Auroradon, and of course, Verite just continues to get better as more generic support comes out. I've made previous videos on the channel talking about how I don't think Verite is necessarily the problem, and I do like Verite existing because it gives other decks that are reliant on Fusion a better chance to play, but there's no denying that we have a problem here in some capacity. It's just, I think the problem lies in these Fusion spells that are sending cards from deck, effectively making it a double plus, because you get to Fusion summon whatever monster you're summoning, and mill stuff, and get things you want in the graveyard. Fusion Destiny, Red Eyes Fusion are just a couple, but there's other ones too. Things like Neos Fusion, while not as powerful, is still a really good card, and we know there's upcoming Neos support, so who knows whether or not that could work its way into some type of competitive setting as an engine going forward. And the argument is, you know, well, do you keep hitting these cards? Do you hit Verite? And what I personally would like to see Konami do is just stop printing Fusion cards like that are called X Fusion, right? Because if it doesn't have Fusion in the title, Verite can't send it, and then you sort of alleviate that problem. We've got 3 of them right now, but really only 2 that have been any kind of problem with Red Eyes Fusion, which has kind of fallen out of favor a bit. Although recent results and deck lists seem to indicate people are going back to Dragoon a little bit. I think maybe there was some shifting with, you know, the shiny new toys coming out, and now people are starting to work Dragoon back into things, especially with new Dark Magician support. I'm still maintaining that Red Eyes Fusion and Fusion Destiny should be the ones to get a hit there, but you're going to have people that take a strong stance to say, you know, Verite's the problem, ban Verite. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't think it would be the most shocking thing in the world at this point, just to sort of put that take out there. And Halk, as much as I like the card, at this point, I'm starting to wonder whether or not hitting it might just be the way to go. It would free a lot of other things off the list, like Go Up Lobe, Jet Synchron, etc. You guys know all the tuners that were banned, you know, for Halk's abusability factor, I suppose. E-Telly at 3 is definitely something that makes you question whether or not Halk is okay, and there's a lot that goes into it. But it's no doubt better now than it has been in quite some time, especially with the plethora of support around it, and the Brave Token engine giving you free extenders, meaning you can have a lot more cards at your disposal and end on much stronger boards just by playing the game basically the way that you'd normally play. So this is all kind of to say, what, if any, moves would you guys like to see Konami make, and do you think that we have any necessity for an emergency ban list to fix this format? I think Scythe would be the prime candidate to hit if they were to quote-unquote do something like that, emergency ban list. But I kind of think that we won't see any hits or updates until late March, early April at the earliest, and it may be a bit longer than that, so whether or not you would consider that quote-unquote an emergency list is really up to you and your perception, but I don't think we're going to get anything in the vein of 2016 or 2004 or anything like that, where these lists come out, you know, abruptly as an addendum list or an adjustment list. I just think Konami's mindset is not going to be there, and I don't know that we've seen enough yet in terms of actual printed competitive results where something would necessitate that change. So I know this video is a little bit all over the place. It's a topic I wanted to talk about for a while, but it's also kind of interesting because it's so polarizing and people are all over the place, but it's gaining traction, and I'm just curious about people's thoughts on it. I want to start a discussion. So do you guys think we need to have some kind of emergency or adjustment list here in addition to the existing one? Do you think it's a bit of an overreaction and people just need to sort of calm down and find ways to play around things? We all agree Scythe is definitely a problem, and there might be ways to fix that package, as well as things like skill drain, but I don't think Konami's going to want to come out and say, yeah, we screwed up, you know, that soon, and make any kind of callback changes like that. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.